a real pleasure for us here at Saffron to have you as a co-host. I don't want to call myself a host and you the guest. I think with both co-hosts, it's a pleasure to spend some minutes together to address how two aspects that we both believe and we both know very well are critical to the return to normality or to normal life is going to be disrupted or affected by this pandemic that we've been living for almost 3 months, but as we stand today. On the one hand, Adolfo, from a real estate, from an office standpoint, from the way we live, where we live, and on the other hand, from a brand and an experience, a cultural impact. What do we believe this normal is going to be living up with? I think it's quite fascinating to me because we're not going back to a normal that existed before, because I don't think none of us has been through. I mean, maybe those that live in the area of Chernobyl or something like that had to go back to normal in a particular way, but that was a different sort of Soviet Union compared to the liberal world today. And I think it's so new to all of us that we leaders are actually experiencing as we move along. And we both want our teams to start coming back to normal from next week or early June, and we'll see how it works. We're taking obviously all the safety standards and all the care possible so that everyone feels comfortable. But let's see how it goes. What do you think the future of the workplace will be with coronavirus? And I love to say it with coronavirus and not after coronavirus. God knows when coronavirus is going to leave us. So I think we should exactly. So I think we should really talk about our lives with coronavirus. What do you think?
Definitely.
From your standpoint, the future of the workplace will be with the coronavirus.
Well, good morning, and thanks, Jacob, for the initiative. It's really a pleasure to be with you and to have this dialogue, from the different perspective of this situation, which is it's very unique for sure. No? Well, look, the way I see this is obviously the impact is big. It has affected our lives. It has affected the way we work. But I see clearly that this is going to accelerate a lot of things that were already happening in many aspects. The impact that this has had in the companies and in the normal ongoing work day by day is that actually we all have been forced, or at least a big part of the workforce has been forced to work remotely, and that has facilitated for many people to test that situation and to check actually that it can work very well, and that it can be effectively something to complement the normal sort of workday. Not something that, in my opinion, will substitute, but something that will be there as a good complement. So in that sense, I take always change, as a good opportunity to improve. And coronavirus, with all obviously the very negative impact that has had in many aspects, I think there will be probably the positive of accelerating that change. And I think, and we will have time maybe later on to discuss, that we might be able to see some examples of other sectors that has been more affected by technology, like maybe the retail sector, where we talk a lot about the omni-channel and we talk about the role of the shop or the bricks and mortar part of the business, and how has been forced by technology and by access to work to buying remote to adapt the footprint and to adapt the role of the shop. In that sense, probably we need to reflect on what is going to be the need of adaptation for that traditional office. And we will see that something that was already important, like brand awareness, like a tool to attract talent, like a place to interact with other employees from your company, but also with clients and maybe with companies, you know, from different sectors, with sort of an open architecture approach, the role of the physical space will become even a leverage or a positive tool in order to enhance those attributes and those activities. And on the other hand, maybe there will be situations in which actually there is no need to be at the office, just because it is more efficient to work remote, or actually to work as we've been, you know, working, you know, on travels, or working, you know, on destination to other geographies. So a lot of things that we will be able to discuss later.
Absolutely. I mean, because to me, there's one thing which is fundamental and that we cannot ignore as business people and leaders of organizations, which is at the end of the day, on the one hand, we're social animals, and we need to interact with people. And this interaction that we've always used in a physical way has been incredibly well replaced by the Zooms of this world, and how not just on a work standard, but also on a social standard, we've adapted ourselves incredibly fast to a life which is virtual and not real. But from a company standpoint, and I liaise with what we're just saying at the very end. To me, it is fundamental that we understand that we cannot ignore the fact that an office has been our home away from home. I don't know how many hours have we spent in our office, you know, for the last, well, since we started working. You know? So for a third of our daily lives, we spent it in a particular environment where we mingled and met and shared and fought and had arguments and had laughs and had everything, and fell in love or fell out of love, and many things that us as human beings need from an anthropological standpoint. And there's something I was watching the other day. I was watching a really nice interview to Yuval Harari, the guy that wrote *Sapiens*, and who said something that I found really interesting, and I really want to share with you here, which is he was saying, well, if you recall when you were at school or when you were at uni, the funniest part of being at university was not the masterclass of Professor X or Professor Y. It wasn't really when you had to do an exam, but it was the breaks. Everything that had to happen happened in the breaks. This is where you actually spoke with your colleagues. This is where you actually learned about what was through the grapevine. This is where you really got to understand what was going on and what was not going on. And those breaks which in the office are the kitchen, the corridor, the discussions that you might have on a lift, etc., have vanished immediately, or did vanish the week of whatever it is, 15th of March onwards. And we found ourselves on a bumper-to-bumper Zoom or Hangouts or Facebook gyms meeting on a daily basis, which were incredibly productive, but lacked the laugh, the teasing, the fun, and I think we need to, it is obvious that the safety is paramount, the concern of the safety is paramount, but I think we must not ignore the fact that unless we take care in a new way to enhance the protagonism of the office, us organizations as brands will little by little lose its old magic, its old spark. At the
Absolutely.
End of the day, what would be the difference between working for CBRE and working for a
Absolutely.
competitor of yours, or working for Saffron and working for a competitor of ours? And this is what, when you walk in the office, people see you, they hear you talking there, and that has disappeared. And I think this is something that we cannot ignore. Don't you think so?
Absolutely. And again, we go to the parallel situation or analogy with the retail sector. No, in that case, it's more evident. No, because when you are selling goods, you have to, of course, you have to be client centric, and of course, you have to make sure that you have a relationship with your client in order to engage. The role of what is that interaction has been redefined in the shop, and it has become much more around experience and much more about feeling the attributes of the product or the service. And in that sense, it's just exactly the same rationale. The relationship between the talent and the company that hires and nurtures that talent has to have bonds, have to have links, and has to have a place in which that talent operates. Not only one place, which is the headquarters. It would be the headquarters of the office. It would be the home, and the home might need to be adapted as well. And will be, when you're working on the client or when you are moving, from one place to the other. All that forms the omni-channel sort of approach. And all those elements need to be connected with the company. But certainly, the office is the place that the company can control and define and decide in order to enhance the productivity, but to enhance the link between the people, which at the end of the day is the company. The companies are nothing. No? As Harari would say, the companies are groups of people having relationships all together. That's the reality of it at the end. So if there is not a common place in which you meet and mingle and create, and not only, I insist, within the boundaries of the company, but also with the external side of the company, because the relationships go beyond the employees of the company. They go with the providers, they go with the clients for sure. They go with other companies that we bond together in order to make better products. So at the end of the day, we design spaces and we work with multinationals and technological groups that are maybe small but growing fast. And this was already before coronavirus. This dimension of actually thinking hard with an employee-centric approach, how we can treat even better and get the most of our talent for them to be in an environment where they thrive.
I cannot agree more, Adolfo, but the obvious question that comes to my mind from a layman, because you're the expert in real estate, is, do you think we will need larger offices or smaller offices?
That's okay.
Because the initial reaction could be, no, we'll need smaller offices because half of the time people will be at home, or half of the time, or half of the people will not be able to come to the office because of the social distancing. So why do we need them? But on the other hand, if we want the offices to be a celebration of the culture and a celebration of what us as human beings working for a particular brand, then we need larger offices. And I read the other day, Eric Schmidt, the former chairman of Google, saying, no. From now onwards, offices will need to be much larger. So the last thing I, as a businessman, want to think about is, God, if I now spend X in rent, I don't want to spend 2X in rent.
Absolutely. Look, it's the question that is very live. As you can imagine, I'm getting that question very often. But look again, what is happening in the retail sector? Are shops becoming tinier or larger? Larger. The nature of the relationship they want to preserve needs to create a reason for people to go to that space.
Yeah.
So, look, it's probably not an answer that you can say generally. It will depend on sectors. It will depend on the nature of the sector and the kind of talent they got and the mobility within that sort of workforce. But in general, at the least, I think it will be, as a minimum, probably quite neutral, because what we will say is that for sure it's going to be less density as a direct effect of the coronavirus, but probably a more permanent effect after, there is vaccine and all that.
Yeah.
Just because the space kind of design will pivot into having things that are more focused on first probably the hospitality side of the space, a welcoming area, which probably will have a wow effect and will deliver the attributes of the brand. You go there, you have an interview to be interviewed. You want to make a sense of what is this company like. And it's like when you are invited to a friend's house. You go there and you start looking, and our brain goes very fast into making patterns and saying classic or modern or
a fundamental trait of your brand. You have to convey the very first time, the very first touch point that you have with the organization in a real life format. You want it to really translate what your brand stands for. Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely. You cannot imagine when we moved to our new offices in Castellana 200, I mean, the amount of positive feedback that we have in our young talent program as one of the criteria that, because these people are super connected, they are very intelligent, and it's not what you tell them, it's what they get, what they see. Obviously, you have to be consistent in everything, and the space is a big attribute, and it goes back in history. And I think our brains are wired to to assess very, very rapidly about the kind of physical spaces we operate in. So probably that would be a change, more space for the hospitality side, the welcoming side. But there will be also less density. There will be wider areas. Probably we will move into probably bigger volumes as well, because people will appreciate volumes, will appreciate light more. It will, because all those elements, the volume, the space, the light, it helps to deliver some attributes in terms of the brand, the clarity, the transparency, whatever experts, in Saffron, whatever attributes, a service or good or a company wants to deliver as sort of the contract that it gets from the very, very beginning with the talent. And of course, the space is a big tool for that. And of course, the way you design it and the way you keep it, it will affect that relationship. So yes, probably similar, in some cases even more, maybe less offices, but maybe better ones, better prepared, more technology. Even, yes, we will still be using Zoom. We will be, actually, one of the things I tell you is happening to us as kind of right now, is there is a bit of a paradox. We are more isolated physically because people still tend to be at home, etc., until we can kind of normalize. But as a global company, I feel that we are much more connected globally.
Yeah.
Now it's super easy to get the expert for, refinances in New York coming, to talk with a company in Malaga. Or, have the head of design in Finland.
Because you only need an hour of him. Otherwise, 4 months ago, you would need 3 days of him. Now you only need 1 hour of him. Absolutely. Yeah.
He doesn't need to travel. Everybody will understand that he's not going to travel. But, everybody gets the benefit of having the best talent. And I think that's a big plus. So that probably will mean that maybe we don't need so many physical locations, but we need hubs, very well prepared to have that relationship.
One of the questions that come to us when we think about space as a brand is the tension that exists between having open space areas versus having closed offices. And one of the messages that we've received recently from clients when tackling the brand aspect of their offices was maybe we're going to move from open space to closed space because of the safety standard. Of course, if you have your own office, you don't need to have screens, you don't need to worry about wearing a mask the whole day because you're isolated within your own office. And when somebody comes in, but obviously the impact of having a collection of small offices, which is like the old style, if I can call it old style, approach to office layout, there's a big question there, because on the one hand, we've seen some research showing that open space layouts does not produce the efficiency that one actually thought was going to produce, and small offices layouts actually produces much more efficiency. On the other hand, if you have an open space, the relationship is better. So what is your view in terms of how is the office, the layout going to be evolving from a...
And then again, this debate had started before coronavirus. We are moving to an activity-based design of the space, which means, activity-based means that we have to provide, we have first to understand our business, understand what we do, understand the needs of our employees and talent. Absolutely. And then based on their activities, we design the space. So there is not a sort of a single question to this, single answer. But in general, I think if you ask me, kind of leaning into more sort of open space or more closed space, if we kind of keep, kind of elaborating on what we were talking before, the reason to go to the office, and taking your example of the Harari and the school and the breaks, one of the main reasons to go there is actually to interact with people, to network. People from your company or clients or people that work with you. So actually, if you go there to get into an office, I mean, maybe that activity, not necessarily should be done in the office, because actually, to be concentrated, you can be in the office, but you can be in other places like your home as well. So I think there will be a natural tendency to use a bit more those spaces to network, and hence I think we will define spaces that are designed and thought to create serendipity moments, to create project-based work, to create natural ways of interaction. And of course, we might have a library or a place to reflect, but maybe that will be designed like a library. Library is a space of concentration. The people go there also to be together in a library, and they have the benefit of having all that access to knowledge, etc. And then there are the breaks, and you get in and you get out, and then maybe you comment on what you've been reading. So yes, we will have areas for concentration, for groups, or obviously, or even for just a person. But we need to reflect: is that the main role now with the technology? That's what we need to think. So probably a bit more leaning into more sort of collaboration, sort of open, but based on activities and actually what we
and the big question that comes to me here is something that we all thought, and I have to say, when we opened our office in San Francisco and we had an office in New York, we used WeWork because it was a fantastic solution for flexibility, not very high price, not very long-term commitment, and fun because the layout, the design of every workspace was really, really good.
And flexible.
Super flexible, and allowed you to, as you grew, you could get more space. But obviously, with the impact of coronavirus and the social distancing and all, I mean, the model is going to become obsolete overnight. No,
it needs to be reviewed. It needs to be reviewed. And I think my answer was a bit trying to get a bit above the short impact of coronavirus, because obviously, if you ask me what is going to be the next months to come, obviously, definitely in that case, we are moving into less common areas and more private areas and so on. But I think that is more related because of the short-term impact, the health aspect, than just the willingness to operate that way.
Culture, we've discussed a lot about the impact and the importance of culture in our offices, going back to Harari, or not just to Harari. I mean, we all know that there's the role an office play in shaping the brand, in shaping the culture of the organization, in being the shell where we, the leaders, can interact with other people, and other people interact with us. And so we see a top-down approach, but as well as a bottom-up, and you can really feel it firsthand. As I say, from an epidermic, from a skin approach, what's going on in the office. You see the mood of the office. This, if we circumscribe the office to the fun place, or to the break place, or to the flagship store, if I can call it, effect, we're gonna. I have to say that one of my concern is how do I manage so that I don't dilute the very strong culture that Saffron has by balancing the work from home and in real life modes. Because yes, we all travel a lot, and when I mean, if you're traveling somewhere, it's a bit like working from home because people don't
Yeah,
see you. People
absolutely.
see you on a screen, or people see you on a phone, or people don't see you. But there's always a home. I mean, there's a home, of course, your home, and your home was where you were there to rest, to see your family, to
Yeah.
interact with your wife. But now, inevitably, we start to realize that our professional home was the office. And in that office is where many, many things from an anthropological standpoint, as we said at the beginning, used to happen. And I have to admit, I find it very hard to think that this is going to disappear for good, because
No. I totally agree. This is not going to disappear. This is going to become more important.
I see.
This is going to become more important. But that's why I think, as with example of the retail and that relationship with the consumer, that's why retailers are fighting the temptation of buying from home and creating spaces where people want to be, maybe where kids want to play together again. And that's why I think those spaces where we are going to, to enjoy the brand experience, to, mingle with others, and to have that sort of link with the company and with the community that the company constitutes, they need to adapt and they need to be defined in order to enhance that experience. So I totally agree with you. And I think when you say, well, how are we going to make sure that there's no dilution of that? I cannot agree more. We have to be mindful that some things might be better if they are done not in the office. For example, we might probably review, do we need to get there everybody at the same time at the peak hour? Probably, I guess not. Or it happens something if someone has a project that needs a lot of concentration, and there is a better reason at that moment not to be in the office. That can be good, actually. That doesn't have to be a problem. But we have to put a reason for them to come back, and we have to create an ambience that makes actually them wanting to go because they get something out of it. So I think we are absolutely in agreement. And maybe I would like to forget, maybe Jacob, maybe to also, ask you a question or see how you react from the point of view that this is not only a debate about the specific enclosed space of an office. It also affects the wider perimeter, of the city and the neighborhood, because that's also one of the reasons and one of the things we experience. And as we know, there are thriving places where people want to be. We all talk about the vibe of New York, or the strength of a city like London with the cosmopolitan aspects of it. All that is becoming even more important now that some people, especially the most talented people, can more realistically afford to choose where they live and where they work. And I think then it's not a question only in order to create that experience of obviously creating a great office, but also thinking about what is around that office. What is the experience when you go and have lunch, or when you go out to sport, or when you go for leisure or for education. Education is going to be a big reason to go back to the office as well, because it's not the same experience to have an education from home that have an education in direct contact with someone that is teaching you the old way, going back to the Middle Ages. The best way to learn is by doing, and by doing together with a guy or girl that knows how to do it, and maybe sharing with others that are learning. So probably education will be another good reason to be together in the office. What do you think about the city and the neighborhood?
Because I was going to say that. I mean, this we've for a number. I mean, I think we've had 3 or 4 clients in Silicon Valley in the area of San Jose. If you go, I don't know whether you've been to San Jose, but if you go to San Jose, it feels like being in Bangalore. It doesn't feel at all like being in California. You walk on the street, it's full of Indian people. The food, the restaurants I mean, you smell curry, which is fine. It's wonderful, no? But but there's nothing. When the first time I went to San Jose, I said, "Oh, wonderful!" I'm going to Silicon Valley, and I never thought it was going to feel like when I've been to Bangalore. I mean, obviously it's a bit more civilized than Bangalore, and there's less traffic than Bangalore, and it's a bit
Yeah.
cooler than Bangalore, but
Yeah.
it feels Indian.
Yeah.
With um, the impact that this is going to have, it is obvious that you would be able to work for a company that is headquartered in San Jose, but might not need to feel the Indian, or might be missing the Indian restaurants and the Indian ambiance that one can get in the San Jose area. The same thing applies to when I come to the office. I live in a particular area of Madrid, but when I come to the office, I know I can have lunch in a restaurant that I wouldn't go if I work from home. Because if I work home, I eat a lunch at home, and the component of socializing whilst you're having lunch disappears. Of course, you have lunch with your family if your family is home, but it's not the same thing as having lunch with a colleague, having lunch with a client, having lunch with a friend, which actually introduces an element of break and an element of serendipity, as you mentioned before, in our daily lives. Because one of the dangers that I see in working from home is the monotony that it creates.
Absolutely. We know that well.
We know this well because we've been forced to do this for almost 3 months. And the beauty of office work, if I can call it that way, is that it broke with this monotony. Because depending on the day you ate with somebody else, or maybe you ate in the office, or maybe you did, but it wasn't the same every single day. And this, to me, is where the city can play a fundamental role, because the city is such. I mean, one of the things that we've realized, that we've worked in brands for cities, or cities as brands, is that contrary to what many people think, there's nothing more alive than a city. You go to, you mentioned London, or you mentioned New York, and you and I have had the privilege to go to the cities very often. But people that don't go very often to London, to New York, to Paris, or to Bangkok, for that matter, and they go there once every 5 years, they realize that if you ignore the shrines, or you ignore the main landmarks of the city transforms itself every so many years or so many months. I mean, in New York, in so many months, or in London,
absolutely.
And the beauty of a city is that it's a living animal, and this living animal that has its own different areas, all different neighborhoods, all different cultural elements, all different restaurants, and that's the magic element of the city, where as soon as we open back, or they get open back, we need to understand the role that they play in our daily lives as living animal. I mean, this is like an ecosystem where we are part of it, but the city plays a very, very important role in this ecosystem. And some people have not really realized how important it is to bring life to the city, or to articulate the life of the city, so that the users, us, make the most of it. And when we talk about office space, and when we talk about the role of office in our lives, I think it's very important that we take a larger view from the actual box, if I can call it a box, where my office or your office sits in Almagro or in Castellana, to the neighborhood, or to the larger neighborhood when we go to our office in London or in Paris. And I think this is such an important thing that we need to keep in mind and not ignore when we talk to our employees, because some of them will find it super fun to stay home forever and work from home forever because it's very productive, but they will miss they will miss the life that we experience when we come to the city. And I think it's from a brand, and I look at it from a brand standpoint, and if I associate brand to experience, there's nothing more experiential than the life in a city. And I think it's so important that we don't ignore this.
Absolutely, Jacob. Look, this is real. We are seeing it every day. There is a fight for talent. It's a society of knowledge and of scientific development and technology. That means that there are going to be winners and losers, and the winners will be the ones that realize that the best offer for that talent is what will attract eventually the best talent. And you have to think, and we advise companies where to locate globally, and they look at many aspects. Of course, they look at taxes, they look at cost of living, they look at many things. But one of the key top things, probably the top thing, is access to talent, access to the best talent at a competitive cost. And that means that has a reality in terms of wealth creation, because it's easy for everyone to understand that if you have a massive company, deciding to have a regional headquarters in a city, that affects the city. We know the situation with Amazon creating that big contest, and so that affects cities, that affects the wealth of the community, that affects the dynamism. So I guess yes, and that's why we are talking about also approaching this from a wider perspective, not just from designing an office physically, or not just from looking at how much is the rent per square meter, but more about talking about what are the attributes, how you present them, how you design. So yes, I think you will not need, Jacob, to convince the best talent and the best professionals to go to the office. They will if the product in that office and that neighborhood and that experience it helps them.
Exactly, I was going to say that because companies want to go where the top talent is, and we know that top talent is going to be in the city that offers them many things beyond work, because work is very important, but it's also entertainment, there's culture, there's restaurants, there's the possibility of doing sports, etc., etc. And I think here you create this virtuous cycle where things get aligned, and officers, cities, and talent end up being in the right place. And this is why one cannot ignore the importance of the city when we're talking about officers and talent.
And you know what, Jacob, and maybe this is an interesting additional angle. I think, I might be wrong, but I think offices will become probably more expensive. The right offices will become more expensive. Why? Because they will generate more productivity. So far from saying, coronavirus impact, everybody working from home, big depression for office, no one wants offices, and prices will go down. For those locations and those spaces that kind of put all these elements that we are discussing together, the companies will be able to pay more for that, but just because the very simple fact that they will extract more out of that. It's a supply and demand factor. Totally. And obviously we realize there are not so many, big places to be and to work. So, there is a bit of a scarcity in terms of those spaces that get it right. And that means cities that get it right. That means companies that get it right. So even if we are going to live maybe for some time a less globalized world, we all know what is happening. I think the mega trend is there. And I think you cannot stop these young people from being very, very international and very global in their DNA. And I hope that doesn't change, by the way, because I think that's a great force of evolution.
Well, Adolfo, I think it's been incredible. We've had a truly fascinating conversation where we mix things that are very tangible and very intangible. There's nothing more tangible than brick and mortar, and nothing more intangible, people think, than a brand. Although a brand is the most valuable asset that an organization has. I think we've covered many, many things. I think I have learned a lot by listening to you. I was particularly fascinated by this analogy that you've introduced between the need for omnichannel and the retail and the office analogy. I think that metaphor is fascinating. And I guess that the only thing that I can hope for is that next time, instead of meeting by Zoom, we meet in person in the Saffron office of Mumbai or in the CBRE office of Hong Kong, or some fascinating place that we will have, no doubt, lots of fun.
Absolutely, I was going to say the same, Jacob. It's been fascinating and great to have this dialogue. We've been able to do it with the technology, but definitely we will continue this, probably having a nice lunch after visiting our offices, interacting like human beings in a more direct way. I'm looking forward to that.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.